Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
The audio commentary. It's a dying art form, but here at One Track Mind, I, your wonky yet affable host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, analyze film through the prism of these embryonic forms of podcasting, one audio commentary at a time. Masterpieces, crapster pieces, live action, animation, cult classics, films literally no one has ever heard of. No track is too small and no track is too big. Join me and my guests from the entertainment world as we keep these features alive every other Tuesday. Hey, who else is going to discuss Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey one week and Citizen Kane the next? Us, that's who. Sure, you have to put up with my voice, but there's a certain give and take in this industry. That's One Track Mind, part of the Someone's Favorite Productions family, and available wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw, and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend. He put the Mike White in Mike White March, the host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
Mike is not Mike.
I said your name 3 times in one sentence, and you didn't appear in this room immediately.
Were you looking in a mirror?
No, I wasn't, but I was expecting you to show up in a black and white striped suit.
Oh, sandworms, am I right?
Hey, how you doing? Hey, come here. Got something good for you. Come on. Come here. Oh, hey, there goes Elvis.
Wow. I did not think we'd be making Beetlejuice references in a podcast about how are we going to say this? Nagisa Ōshima's death by hanging.
Very good.
But here we are. So on this episode, we are going to be talking about the first film in our look at Japanese New Wave. That is the genre that Mike gave us for Mike White March. So we are starting with Nagisa Ōshima's death by hanging. The film tells the tale of R, a Korean man who survives being hung by his neck only to question his reality, existence, and his place in the world, along with some musings on the death penalty.
昭和42年の法務省の世論調査では死刑廃止反対が 71%、賛成が 16%。日本人の間では死刑廃止論ということは全く評判が悪いわけだ。つまり日本人はみんな死刑を肯定しているわけだ。しかしここで死刑を肯定している連中は本当に死刑執行を見たことがあるだろうか、あるいは死刑場を見たことがあるだろうか。この連中は全くそんなことを全然見たことなしに、ただ人を殺した悪いやつは死ぬのが当たり前だなんて簡単な理由で死刑廃止に反対しているに決まってると俺は思う。この映画は昭和33年小松川女子高校生殺しと言われた朝鮮人青年李珍宇の犯罪をモデルにしている。李珍宇はその後除名運動の高まりに水をかけるようなやり方であっという間に死刑に処せられてしまったけれども、彼が獄中で達した考え方の高さというものは日本の戦後青春のピークに立つもんだと俺たちは思う。で俺たちはその李珍宇を素材にして李珍宇の処刑が失敗して彼がもう一度蘇った。でその蘇った彼をみんなが殺そうとする。彼にもう一度彼がどういう犯罪を犯してなぜ死ななければならないかということを納得させて殺そうとする。そういうフィクションを作り上げ、現実に死んだ李珍宇よりももう一段高い人物、俺たちの想像した R という人物を作り出して、その人物によって 死刑制度、それからその死刑をもって我々を威嚇している国家を弾劾する作品を作ろうと考えた。だからといって我々の映画が単に難しい理屈ばっかり言ってると考えられても困る。リチウムにお前がリチウムであるということを納得させようとする刑務所の役人たちの動きは全く滑稽でおかしく、それは事実滑稽でおかしい存在でしかない俺たち日本人皆さんたちの姿ぴったりだと思う。それを見て皆さんは笑って笑いながら魂を締め付けられるような痛みを感じるはずだ。俺たちは完璧に死刑場を調べ、本物そっくりの死刑場を建て、俺たちは全く本物である死刑場を作り、そこで全く本物の死刑執行を行い、それによって皆さんが本当に依然として死刑に賛成できるかどうか、それを試してみたい。ここはアートシアターだ。しかし俺たちはアートを作ってるわけでもないし、皆さんもここをシアターだと思ったりしないでほしい。俺たちは街頭でデモをしたり働いたりしてるのと同じように俺たちの映画を作り、皆さんも街角で遊んだり働いたり喧嘩をしたり人を憎んだり人を愛したりするのと同じような気持ちでこの映画を見てほしい。この映画を見ることが皆さんにとってのやっぱり行動でなければならないと俺は思う。国家はなぜ法の名のもとに合法的に人を殺すことができるのか、なぜ人を殺す権利があるのか。
たとえ死刑にさせられたって俺たちは死ぬわけにはいかない。また戦争、国家が国家利益のもとに大量の人間を皆殺しにする、そういう戦争がある限り俺たちは死ぬわけにはいかない。国家がある限り俺たちは何をすることも許される。常に国家には罪があり俺たちには罪がない。国家こそ有罪で俺たちは絶対に無罪なんだ。そういうことを言うために俺たちはこの映画を作った。俺たち、俺とそのゲバラたち。
田村勉、佐々木守、深尾道則、吉岡康弘、戸田重章、西崎秀夫、林光、佐藤圭、東良六甲、小松法政、渡辺文夫、小山明子、朝鮮人青年ユン・ユンド、石堂敏郎、町田正夫、足立正夫、中島正幸、山口拓司、そして私大島渚。
So, before I get into my thoughts on the film and your thoughts, Mike, I'm curious, why did you pick Japanese New Wave, and why did you pick Death by Hanging?
Well, you want to know the truth? I'm sitting here in my basement and I've got my wall of DVDs, and you asked me last month, what should we do for March, Mike? I don't know what we should do. And I looked over and there's this whole row of Japanese New Wave that I have. So I said, why don't you try some of that? Because nobody really talks about these films as much as they should, not knowing that I would kind of be shanghaied into this podcast as well, or else I would have picked something a lot easier and lighter to cover.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So earlier this year, in January, we did David Lynch, and that was on the suggestion of my good friend Zach, who works at Rainbow Comics in Lincoln. And look, if you suggest something, your ass is on the podcast. Because that's the way it goes. So he suggested David Lynch, so he was there all month. I'm trying to get you on as many podcasts as I can this month because you know more about this than I do. You're kind of more of a steward of deep cinema genres than I am. So better to have someone who's extremely knowledgeable on the podcast than to have me just kind of, flapping in the wind, not knowing what I'm talking about. So that's why you're here. And I'm glad that there was not some deep answer to why we're talking about Japanese New Wave.
No, it's not like, March 2018 marks the 50th anniversary of whatever. I mean, this is the anniversary of May 1968 in 2 months here, which was a huge month for student protests, for radicalism. 1968 marked a whole lot of changes all around the world. It was a big deal in France. It was a big deal in Czechoslovakia. It was a big deal in Japan. And a lot of film movements had started well before 1968. The French New Wave had started a few years earlier. The Realismo movement in Italy had started a few years earlier. And the Japanese New Wave movement had started a few years earlier, but really took root in 1968. This movie was from 1968 and is one of a few films that came out from a group called the Art Theater Guild. They had actually started in 67 with their first production of A Man Vanishes by Shoei Imamura, but Death by Hanging was following pretty close on its heels. And to me, Nagisa Ōshima is kind of the poster boy for Japanese New Wave. And really, when I said Japanese New Wave, you can't talk about that without talking about Nagisa Ōshima.
And I mean, you know me, I am a bastion of honesty. So I had never seen and or even heard of Japanese New Wave, which is probably the best direction to be coming at these films from, having no kind of preconceived notion about what Japanese New Wave means. I mean, to be fair, I know what New Wave is when you talk about like British New Wave music, like, Squeeze or Genesis. Those are both British New Wave. You could make the case that Talking Heads is, but just because David Byrne is a British gentleman does not make them British New Wave in their entirety, since the other three members of the band are American. However, I know what that means in regards to music, but in film it's a little different. So coming into these films, especially this one, with no preconceived notion of what I'm going to be watching, it's kind of exciting, because I don't know how these films are going to... Well, you okay?
Sorry. Yep, just coughing.
Oh. So I didn't know what to expect. I'd watched Celine and Julie Go Boating, which is French New Wave, correct?
Yeah, you could consider that French New Wave. That was a little bit more towards the end. When it comes to a lot of New Wave films, they were kind of rejecting, or especially I'm looking at like France at the moment. Like French New Wave was kind of the avant-garde. It was the one that was leading the way.
Right.
And a lot of that was the rejection of the old. Most of the people that were kind of starting up, or at least I think of, Truffaut and Godard, their whole thing was, kill your idols, get rid of this old stuff. We're going to do movies on the cheap. We're going to go out in the streets with our cameras, and we're going to be guerrilla filmmakers, and we know how to make movies, and we're not going to be, tied to the studio and make these, major poetic kind of things that some of their elders were making. So they were rejecting a lot of the people that were French filmmakers at the time, and even rejecting some of the Hollywood standards. And when it comes to some of these other new waves, it was kind of the same thing. And it was kind of like an embracing of the youth and saying, we're young people, we know how to do this. And in Japan, it was a little worse than it was in some of the other film arenas, let's say, because there was this strict code of having to work your way up through the system before you could ever even put your hands onto a camera. And so they really threw off those shackles and just said, listen, we can just take a camera and go out and do what the hell we want to do. So when they were doing their cheaper guerrilla filmmaking, it kind of went away from what Japanese filmmaking was at the time.
Well, and you can definitely tell that is the case with this film. It is pretty much a condemnation of Japanese culture and
right.
Japanese treatment of others in their own culture, especially Koreans. It was a condemnation of Japanese culture and the Japanese cultural norms and the way.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
way that they were treating, especially Koreans in this film, because R, the main character, is Korean. So, it doesn't feel like a film that's made by someone who's Japanese.
Right.
Because of the way they're treating the Japanese characters in the film, namely all of the public prosecutor and the education officers and everyone that is involved in the hanging of R, the ethnic Korean character in the film. And so it doesn't feel like a film that's made by someone who is Japanese, but when you know that this film is made by someone who is Japanese, I think the weight of this film is a lot stronger, because it feels like more of an introspective look and a teardown of Japanese culture versus just a film that American made about the Japanese. This feels very finger to the pulse of Japanese culture and very a fine-tuned criticism of Japanese culture, kind of on a whole.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Ōshima had kind of been making films that were like this insofar as embracing, juvenile delinquents as your main characters and kind of criticizing the powers that be, but nowhere near to, in my opinion, nowhere near to this level. And yeah, this is really, it might be looking at officials, but you could use so many other groups as stand-ins for those cops and judges and all of the people that are wearing uniforms in this. You could just as easily say that, this is a look at the Japanese film industry and the way that it discriminates against the young. This is a look at, our government and how it handles immigrants. This is a look at this, and but it's nice that it kind of boils it down to a rather small story, because I think that keeps that point. He keeps sticking that knife into the body politic, as it were.
And that, for me, is what makes this film so important, I guess, from what we're looking at now and why we're talking about it in 2018. And it was released in 1968, is that it still feels very relevant, especially all of the kind of musings on the death penalty.
Right.
Because, we as an American culture are still stuck in this rut of the death penalty and using it to punish people. And I personally don't like to get political on podcasts. I know you're different, having been on the projection booth several times, including a very politically charged podcast where we talked about The Visitor. Was that the name of the movie? Or The Strength? What the fuck was that one with Shatner?
Oh, The Intruder.
The Intruder. That was a pretty politically charged podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Primarily because it was very, again, sign of the times, especially for when we recorded it, when you released it, which was the day that Donald Trump got inaugurated. I personally don't like getting into politics on podcasts because it's a movie podcast, but I think inherently we have to talk about it on this podcast. Our culture is still dealing with the use of the death penalty today in 2018, something that, for all intents and purposes, is barbaric, and the character of R talks about it at the end of the film. He talks about how if you murder me, and if murder is bad, then if you're murdering me, you are a murderer, and then you should be murdered as well. You should be executed as well, because you are therefore no better than me.
Well, that one of his guards murders someone, right, and they're just like, don't worry about it.
Right. The double standard on top of everything else.
Well, even more than the death penalty, I think it's just the treatment of minorities and the jailing of minorities. And this is a very relevant topic for 2018. I think it was in January, they were banning books. I think it was like The New Jim Crow or something like that was the name of the book about mass incarceration of African Americans in America. And it was actually being banned from prisons because they didn't want to rile up the prisoners. And it's like, if you look at the numbers of how many Black people there are in prison, how many brown people there are in prison, how many white people there are in prison, it's a major difference. And then you'll hear some people say, oh, well, that's just because, blacks are more criminally inclined. And then you'll hear other people say, no, it's because they live in poverty. And then you'll hear other people say, no, it's the system is rigged. So I think it's more the latter two, personally. I don't think that anyone is inherently bad or more attuned to crime, but I think it's more economic situations as well as things being kind of tilted against Black people. And I think using that as our analogy, looking at this and saying, how is this Korean man being treated? And there's this whole thing where, and I'm kind of jumping around in the plot, but there's a moment where they're trying to convince R that he is R, and they're doing this play acting. All of these guards are doing this play acting, and they're pretending that they are a Korean family. And they're saying, no, you have to be much more rude. And they're just being horrible to one another because that's how they think that Koreans are to one another.
Right. And that, again, so the treatment of an ethnic group within a minority group within a majority group, Koreans in Japan, African Americans in, a primarily white population of the United States. That is, I would say that's one of like the two macro themes of this film, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's one of the macro themes of the film. I would say one of the micro themes of the film is the death penalty, me personally. But the macro themes of the film, I think, are much more interesting than just the death penalty. Is it good or bad? It's, again, personal opinion, I think it's bad. The state I live in reinstituted the goddamn death penalty like last year, the year before. Congratulations. You're a bunch of assholes. But the idea of the treatment of ethnic minorities within a population, I think, is much more interesting. And again, it's topical. We're like you said, looking at the African American population in this country and how they're treated within the criminal justice system is astounding. And looking at the way R is treated in this film, and like you said, there's a whole section of this film that is extremely offensive because it's like, look at the Koreans. They're a bunch of kind of uneducated rubes. They're a bunch of, redneck slobs. And that's not the way Korea is at all, but Japanese culture perceived Koreans as oafish dipshits that they could really talk down to and treat like garbage. And the character of R is the most introspective character in the entire film. He is the most civilized character in the entire film. Obviously, we don't get to see his crimes before the film, but throughout the film, he's the character that is the most level-headed and rational. Because you have the education officer who literally murders someone and gets away with it. And you have the public prosecutor who taunts R at the end of the film, at the kind of the climax of the film. And then you have the priest who is a closeted gay man. I'm assuming that's what they were going for, right?
I think you're safe on that, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just the way the film juxtaposes the Koreans who are meant to be the uneducated versus the Japanese who are the educated from the cultural standard that is, existed in the 1960s. I think that to me, like you said, that for me is the more interesting part of this film.
So the movie starts with them hanging R, and it's just so beautifully shot. Like this was, I think Ōshima had done
documentary style.
Yeah. And Ōshima had done like a dozen movies at this point, and they were very well made, but he strips away so much of that artifice for this and just makes it really, it's gorgeous to look at, but it's so simple, and just the sets are stripped down, the walls so many times are bare, and just the look of this film so often until they kind of go out into the outside world. But when they're inside of this prison area, this execution area, it reminds me of like almost a bare stage, and we're watching a play. Just the way that characters come in and out, it really feels very play-like. And if you were to watch this thing on stage, there would be a noose in the foreground through which so much of the movie is framed, and there would be a Japanese flag in the background because so much is set against that Japanese flag. And when there's not a Japanese flag in the background, or sometimes even in the foreground, there's sometimes circles. There are circles of light back there. There are circles of darkness on other places. And it's constantly reminding you of Japan, of that symbol of Japan, the red sun, in this stark black and white look at how this stuff is going down. And just the blacks and the whites are so beautifully, I can't say saturated for white, but it's just so beautifully filmed and so stripped down insofar as just using the black and white. Because, again, Ōshima had shot tons of stuff in color. He'd used color beautifully in stuff like Cruel Story of Youth. And, yeah, this is all the way, this looks so bare bones.
Well, and I think the kind of style of it being almost a play, I think for me is one of the biggest successes of the film, because it feels so, everything feels so detached from reality, if that makes sense, in a way that allows me to kind of enjoy the themes of the film more and enjoy what the film is saying more than if it were a traditional narrative, as opposed to, again, this like, it has a stage-like quality that I think works in the film's favor.
I completely agree.
Yeah. And I don't know if the rest of the films are going to be like this for the rest of the month. I'm going to assume that they're not going to be, but for me, that is the biggest success of this film, is that it talks about these themes, but it doesn't beat you over the head with these themes, if that makes sense. And like, there are a lot of films out there that beat you over the head with what they're trying to say and what they're trying to get across. And this film is it's strong with the message, but it does it in a way that it doesn't compromise the entertainment nature of the film, because film is entertainment and art in this film's case. And I don't think it compromises the entertainment quality of this film, because this film's almost 2 hours long, but it doesn't, I mean, there's a couple scenes where it drags, but for the most part, I was captivated and held with my attention was held the entire film.
I think it helps that after R dies his first death, he becomes this blank slate. And he doesn't remember anything, so it's up to the rest of the people to remind him of his crimes and to paint him with this brush of the horrible person that they allege that he was before they killed him. And so he is that calm center to everything, because he doesn't remember anything. He just kind of is, I mean, he's basically a zombie in this movie. He's kind of there walking around the living dead, and it is the Japanese people who are hysterical, and they are just going crazy, and just, don't you remember this? And
if you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
You told me this, and we're going to have to do this now, and throughout the movie there are also these little breaks that were given by title cards, where we kind of are about to see, like, here's a title card that will tell us what we're about to see in the next scene. R remembers that he is R, and does it necessarily happen? Not really, because he keeps vacillating between, yes, I remember, and no, I don't remember. And then they just keep trying to do so many things, to the point where they take him out into the world and pretty much put him on the path to murder someone again. Give him a knife, send him on his way. You need to talk to this woman. And they're just setting this guy up for failure. And also, we're looking at that as saying, how much are the Japanese people and the Japanese institutions pushing these Korean peoples into this life of crime? How much are they damaging people by setting these expectations of these people just being slightly better than dogs? And I think it's really making a fine point to it.
Well, and that's kind of something that you always, hear when you talk about not predestination, but the effects of a majority culture on a minority culture. Is, does the majority culture and their reaction to and processing of the minority culture, does that, and those stereotypes that are built into that, does that push that minority culture into those stereotypes? Does it push them to become what the majority culture believes them to be? Is that a thing? And I think the film kind of talks about that, because they push R in that direction. And at the end of the movie, he eventually says, fine, you're right. Like, yes, I am all of these things, but I'm not. And you can't accept that. And that's kind of the biggest point that this film tries to make, is the character of R, there is no escape from his kind of fate in this film.
Right. That's why that noose is always there, reminding us. And like I said, framing so many things through that. And the way that he frames those shots to see people's faces inside of that noose, like their necks, they're ready to have that right around their necks.
Right. Well, and when R's sister shows up, the woman that only he can see for a time, and then the officials can see only after like a certain amount of time, she starts showing up.
Right. Yeah, she's very much like a ghost.
I understand the point of her character, and I think a lot of people will miss what the point of her character is. I think her character is like his inner psyche, and like the way she talks about, you know, him and the way the culture perceives him and where because a lot of what her and R talk about in the kind of one of the more pivotal scenes in the film, where he's sitting in the center of the room and all of the officials are surrounding him and talking about their past crimes and how they're all terrible people. And they're kind of judging R, even though they're just as bad, especially one of the characters that murdered a woman earlier in the film. One of the things they talk about is making your dreams reality and kind of what steps you have to go through to make that the case, and where do what you aspire to be and where reality exists, like that fine line, and where does the line disappear? And I think she's meant to represent his psyche, but obviously the characters can see her. So I guess she's a real person.
Well, she seems, because isn't she at first the corpse of the woman that the one guy murders?
Right.
And he can see her, and he's plagued by her. She's almost like, it's almost like a Shakespearean kind of thing, where the man is haunted by his past crimes, and then he starts talking to all the other guys, and he's just like, look, she's right there, and then one by one they start to recognize her, and then she sits up, and he's like, oh, good, I didn't murder her. And then almost immediately she changes from that shape, from the person that he murdered, into that, and I keep using air quotes whenever I say sister, into that sister character. And when she is the sister, she's wearing these robes and stuff, and they just kind of remind me of, like, I don't know, I forget the character's name, but the Lady Macbeth character from Throne of Blood, and it looks almost like death robes. So it really feels like she's the ghost of all of their crimes, and she eventually, quote unquote, pays the price, as does R again.
Right. She gets hanged. She is hung like he is at the end of the film. But she's hung, and then she comes back in the next scene.
Right. Yeah, they can't really escape from her. She does seem like a manifestation of our psyche as well as their own, and she's kind of a specter of their past crimes.
Right.
Yeah, and when R goes out, tries to leave that place a free man, since he has paid the ultimate price by being hanged once for his crimes. I mean, it's really the definition of double jeopardy, as far as being, you're not being tried twice for the same crime, you're being executed twice for the same crime. And when he tries to leave that place, and there's that light outside that is basically, to me, it feels like a spotlight, just like, no, you can never leave this place.
Because the public prosecutor says, you know that you will always be judged as a dirty Korean.
Right.
You will never be able to re-assimilate back into culture, and the culture will never accept you because you're Korean.
Right. And here's us dumb Americans watching this going, well, they all look the same to me.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, having been to Tokyo and Seoul, and you were in China last year, they don't all look the same.
No,
at all.
No, they don't.
R looks very different from the Japanese characters in the film.
Right.
And, you know, he's a sympathetic character. He's not technically supposed to be. I mean, because he obviously murdered and raped 2 women prior to the beginning of the film. Well, let's take a break, and when we get back, we'll finish up talking about the film. Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a newspaper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS?
Independent News Service, sir, founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak,
What's a Kolchak?
the Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Movies have become a portal to a vast and growing pop culture universe, but you don't need to go over the rainbow to get your pop culture fix. Just head to Rainbow Comics, Cards, and Collectibles. They are your one-stop shop for comics, toys, posters, games, and more. Not a pop culture nerd? No problem. They have something for everyone, including a wide array of sports cards, collectible card games, even memorabilia. Stop by one of their 2 locations today. The flagship location at 3310 South Minnesota Avenue, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or their newest location at 1501 Pine Lake Road, Suite 17, Lincoln, Nebraska. Most importantly, don't forget to add them on Facebook for pop culture news, weekly live videos, and special events.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
All right, we are back, and we are going to finish up talking about death by hanging. I want to talk a little bit more about the end of the film, because you mentioned this scene where the public prosecutor's like, all right, we can't hang you again because you're not the same R, so you're free to go. And then he tries to leave, and then obviously because he's Korean and he will never be able to assimilate back into the culture because the Japanese people will never accept someone who's not Japanese, he says, well, fine, all right, just hang me then. He admits to the crimes, but then he has this kind of monologue where he goes back and forth with some of the characters and says, hey, if you murder me, if murder is bad, and he asks one of the characters, hey, is murder bad? He said, yes, murder is bad. He says, well, if murder is bad, then if you murder me, you will therefore be a murderer as well.
Right. Does an eye for an eye make sense?
Right. And so if they're all murderers, then someone should come behind them and murder them because they are murdering him, which is obviously a pretty strong condemnation of the death penalty and the use of kind of terminal justice to punish, which, again, me personally, I disagree with, but I understand why people support it. I get it. I think for me that the final shot of R's body disappearing when the noose falls,
yeah,
for me, it's a pretty strong image. And it's a pretty condemning image of the Japanese people. And again, this is a fellow countryman, as it were, condemning the Japanese people, which I think is what makes this film so successful, and it allows it to hit so hard, is that it is a film that condemns the Japanese people and the Japanese culture, and not the people so much to some extent, but the people in places of power in the Japanese culture.
Exactly. Yeah, and that to me is what this new wave movement really kind of was about, was making sure, being political, kind of taking down the system, and then also telling stories. And not everything is going to be as political as this, but things are going to be touched by politics throughout the rest of this Japanese New Wave movement, though so much of it is more just, we want to tell the stories that we want to tell. And obviously, you're not going to find a big studio that's going to back something like this. And that's why something like the Art Theater Guild was around, to be able to put money behind some of these projects and to give life to these things that you're not going to find funding for this at Toho. You're not going to find it at Daiei. This isn't Kurosawa filming this. This is, I can't say he was a young upstart. He was born in 1932, so he was in his mid to late 30s when he's doing this. So the angry young man might not have been so young, but he was definitely still angry.
Right, and that, like I said, that, like we've said, that really comes through in this film. How angry he is at Japanese culture and the way that Japanese culture treats others. And like, this is a pretty stark condemnation of Japanese culture, especially by...
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind the scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
Someone who is Japanese.
And Ōshima, he would do that for other people, other races as well, even other minorities within Japanese culture. And I'm not saying outside of Japan. Like there was one film called The Catch where there was a black soldier that was caught, and it really spoke a lot to, the American occupation of Japan that was still going on then. Also talking about outsiders, also talking about racism. So that was a good one to look at. And then I'm trying to think if it's Diary of a Shinjuku Thief, where that is taking place in the Shinjuku district, which has people that aren't necessarily quote unquote pure Japanese. And there's there's all of these strata within Japan. Again, it's kind of going back to what we were saying right before the break, where it's like, for us, Japan is Japan. There's a Japanese culture. There are Japanese people. But within Japan, there are all these different strata. I was talking to a friend of mine today who's Indian, and he was saying, based upon your last name or your first name, people can know where you come from, what your social class is, if you're vegetarian or not, all these things. I'm like, so that's all contained within names of these Indian folks. Who knows what the names of these characters in this movie are? I mean, here we are, we're 50 years north of 1968 when this movie came out. And people have written about this. There have been some great books about Ōshima, about this film in particular. And yeah, that's great, but I don't think we'll ever know it as well as a native Japanese person would, to know all of those little details that are coming out. Probably the way that these characters speak to one another. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if R has a telling accent that you and I can't necessarily pick up, but somebody who's more fluent with the culture would say, oh, well, obviously he's an outsider because he says this word differently. So it's just, like I said, even within Japanese culture, even within the Japanese people, there are these minorities, and Ōshima was also one for kind of pointing out that hypocrisy as well.
And again, I think that it really works in this film's favor that it's a multifaceted look at a lot of somewhat disparate themes. Because you wouldn't think about the treatment of an ethnic minority in a film that's talking about the justice system.
Right.
But I think this film is really successful in talking about both. And I really applaud Ōshima for being able to kind of balance those themes and that message in a way that, again, it's entertaining, but it's also, there is a message. This isn't just entertainment. And also it's beautifully shot, like you said. So
I'm good.
Okay, me too. So Mike, what would you give this film out of 5?
Out of 5? Gosh. Yeah. Can I go like decimal points?
No.
Okay. I give it.
Don't be difficult.
I give it 4 out of 5. I think I would.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
I think I would give it 5 out of 5 if, again, I probably knew more about Japanese culture, could understand those nuances. But as an outsider, it's beautifully shot, very well acted, very well done. I mean, there's really no reason why I shouldn't give it 5 out of 5 other than it's not like something where I'm going to go, oh my God, I have to watch that every single day. Because frankly, it's a rather depressing film. That's not going to keep me away from 5 out of 5 stars either. But I'll give it 4 out of 5.
I'm right there with you. I think it's a solid 4 out of 5. Like you said, it's a thoroughly depressing film. It's a film where the ending, it's a very circular film. Let's put it that way. The way it ends the same way it begins, and the journey that you go on with the character of R, there's a transformation because you're led to believe at the beginning of the film, hey, this guy deserves to be executed. He's a criminal. He's broken the law, therefore he deserves to be executed. In this culture, that's the way it works. And then by the end of the film, you're like, he doesn't deserve this at all. And so I think that that's a big success of the film, is that it takes you on this journey, and at the end of the journey, you're like, all right, well, the film has been successful in painting this character as a sympathetic character. And that for me is a huge success. But like you said, there's some stuff that we as Westerners don't, kind of gets lost in translation, unfortunately. So this film does not have a Rotten Tomatoes score. What a surprise. It came out in 1968, long before the bane of Hollywood existed, aka Rotten Tomatoes. And according to Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is 89% with 243 user scores. So that would be like a 4 out of 5, pretty much.
Oh, so we're right on line with these guys.
With the 243 other people who have gone on Rotten Tomatoes and decided to give their opinion on Death by Hanging. Yeah, so the other deep divers into cinema, into foreign film genres. So, well, let's take our final break and we'll play a preview for the next Kulturecast.
Honey, Mama, what is it? I have to go away for a while. I was told to take a man to a hotel. They said he was an enemy of the state.
Take off your dress.
And in exchange, my mother would get the doctor she needed. Instead, they cut his throat. There could be no witnesses. So they gave me a choice. Die or become a sparrow.
From this day forward, you will become sparrows. Weapons in a global struggle for power. You'll be trained in psychological manipulation. You must learn to push yourself beyond all limitation. Take off your clothes. When we are finished with you, the person you were will no longer exist. Every human being is a puzzle of need. You must become the missing piece, and they will tell you anything.
You have a gift. You know how to survive. This is what you were meant to do. There is a traitor in the government. His last known contact is an American. Get close to him.
I thought I saw you in the pool yesterday.
Are we going to become friends?
Is that what you want?
She's a sparrow. You only matter because of what you can do for them. Work with me and make these men pay.
You are better at this than any of us. Your only problem is you have a soul. We can't trust a word that comes out of her mouth.
There's something else we're not seeing. If she's compromised, she will be eliminated.
What have you done?
You belong to them. They'll never let you go.
I'll find a way.
That's right, on the next Kulturecast, we're going to be talking about Black Widow. I mean Red Sparrow.
Oh.
Another Jennifer Lawrence vehicle that wasn't particularly well received. What a surprise. It could have something to do with the fact that she is extremely boring as an actress. That's my opinion. Not the opinion of Hollywood, who loves to nominate her. I think she's been nominated like 4 times now. Sure. Well, Mike, I guess the last thing that the only other thing I can think of is what's going on over at the projection booth right now.
Oh, busy as always. As we're recording this episode, I am about to press go and published an episode on Falling Down, the Michael Douglas film from 1993. And it's got, over an hour-long interview with Joel Schumacher, who is just incredible to talk to. I didn't think that he would be half as awesome as he was, but he was phenomenal. This is the first time I've ever talked to somebody and they've said, I really don't think that I gave you enough. Can I call you back tomorrow? So
is that to talk about giant mechanical spiders?
Why would he talk about giant mechanical spiders? Okay. Oh, okay. He had nothing to do with Wild Wild West, as far as I know. Yeah.
I know. I'm kidding. I always confuse Joel Schumacher with whatchamajiggy, the guy that Kevin Smith always talks about.
Oh, John Peters?
Yeah.
No, very different. And we didn't talk about bat nipples either. So sorry.
I don't think there's anything that needs to be said about that.
But yeah, and then I've got episodes on Mandingo coming out, The Color of Pomegranates. So it's running the gamut. And there's one very special episode on the next very special episode at the projection booth. We talk about An American Carol, a mixing of Charles Dickens' immortal tale with right-wing propaganda directed by one of the best directors formerly in Hollywood, which would be one of the Zucker brothers, who completely lost his mind and is now conservative.
Ain't nothing wrong with that, Mike.
Sure thing.
I love America.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. Oh, my God. Well, as always, you can head on over to cultureshock.com where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll find links over to iTunes where you can rate and review the show. You can follow me on Twitter at CultureStash. You can follow Mike on Twitter at ProBoothcast or ProBoothcast. And you can follow Culture Shocked on Twitter at CultureShocked.com. Oh, God. I don't know where I was going with that. At Culture Shock.
And you can hear both of us over on the Kolchak tapes, where we're talking about Kolchak every month of the year.
And trying to stay sane in the face of harsh criticism from a very vocal who don't know how to spell am good. It am okay, though. They'll never hear this. Oh, man.
Did you know that episode was just on ETV last week?
Jesus fucking Christ. And big thanks, as always, to Erica and Wovoka for allowing us to use their song Lament as the intro, and my good buddy Justin Scott for allowing us to use his song Two Step as the outro. And the biggest thanks of all to you, Mike, for curating this month's movies and taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk about Death by Hanging.
Well, thanks for having me.
Make sure to check out the next Kulturecast.
Woohoo!
Oh man, two-step, posted with the crew. Yeah. You know how we do, I'm just two-step, drink in my right hand, phone in my other hand, getting to the money. Oh man, two-step, posted with the crew. Yeah. You know how we do.
Hey, two-stepping, know what I'm saying? 1, 2, 1, 2. Benjamin, aka the Black T, you know what I'm saying? Catch me with my crew every day. Two-step. Oh, my phone in my other hand, like, hello? Oh, get into the money, man. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.